The final piece we're going to be looking at is arguably the most important piece, as if we were to lose this piece, this game would be over immediately, and that's the king. The purpose of the game is to capture the opponent's king and to protect your own. As far as movement, the king has the capability of moving one square in any direction. So if the king were here on e5, it could move to any of the squares that surround it. This makes it strong like a queen because it can guard both colors, both light and dark squares. But it lacks the queen or the rook's mobility because a queen can go across the board in one move, whereas the king can only go one square at a time. So moving from one diagonal of the board to the other would take the king 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 moves. A bishop or a queen that were to make that same move, provided that there were no pieces in the way, could do it in one move. So the king's mobility is definitely, certainly not, well, it's not a weakness, it is something to be taken into consideration. Another weakness of the king is its vulnerability to attack, mainly check. And the king's vulnerability to check is a unique feature in the game because no matter how good a person's strategy is, or no matter how imminent their plan is from being hatched, a king must always answer to check. Regardless if we were one move away from checkmate in a position like this, right, because this is checkmate, white would have to answer to a move that would put its king in check. If this bishop were to come down and declare an attack against the king, that would be considered check, and white would have to respond to that before they could continue with their offensive plans. So in this particular instance, white would have to make the decision to either block with a piece, block with a pawn, or move the king. This is why king safety is so important and one of our key opening principles to the game. That's why at the beginning of the game, it's so important to try and facilitate development so that we can castle and we can get our king to safety so they're not exposed to that same level of attack. Once again, we can get into a position from our Italian game that we looked at before, and we can see that this is about as optimized as you can get for king safety. We've made 3 moves. We moved this pawn to open up this line for the bishop and to control the center. Then we've immediately moved to the 2 kingside pieces. And with our 4th move, let's just say that black goes here, we can immediately castle, and we have achieved our king safety in one of our main opening goals, which is getting our king castled and protected. In this position, with this nice defensive blockade, it's going to be very hard to try and mount any sort of surprise attacks on the king with so many defenders, 3 pawns, a knight, and a rook, and potentially other pieces coming to the aid if needed. Now that being said, as the game wears on, the king becomes more valuable in relative to the other pieces. Because the king can move on both colors, the king has a strategic advantage over, say, a bishop. For example, if we had a position like this, where we have a black bishop on a light square, white could very easily try to just maneuver on dark squares, and provided that black doesn't use their king very well, white could potentially be able to infiltrate the black position using all of these dark squares, and this white bishop, although well-intentioned, can't really do much to try and help in that particular circumstance. Actually, towards the end of the game, it's extremely important for the king not just to be safe, but almost the opposite of that. The closer we get to the end of the game, we want the king to be active. So we want the king to come out and help in our endgame goal, which is to take our remaining pieces and try and turn them into decisive advantages. The number one way that happens is one person has extra pawns, more pawns than their opponent does, and they try to move their pawn down the board to the opposite end and create a new queen via promotion. Like so. One unique part about the king is its counterintuitive rules as the games start to progress. We made a big deal about king's safety in the beginning. However, as there are less pieces on the board, the king becomes more and more relatively safe, as there are less attacking pieces against it that could wage an attack, deliver a check, and ultimately checkmate. While we want to keep this king safe in the beginning of the game, as we start to go into the end game, we want the king to become active and actually become a fighting piece. In this particular example, we're using the king as a fighting piece to help assist this pawn make its way down the board to promote to a queen to deliver mate on the black king. So the white king is going to want to advance, and depending on where black moves, is going to want to try to establish or outflank this particular black king, although this is a theoretical draw. If they were to do something like this, the white king, through its activity, has outflanked this black king, and although it's black's move right now, white's next move is going to be promote to queen, and unfortunately, black's king is not in a position to be able to do anything about it, as it can't move here because it'll be under attack. Here is under attack from the pawn, and then moving it back, this under attack here, and then moving it backwards or to the side or something like that, either of these three squares or this square, is not going to aid in the defense of this pawn moving forward and becoming a queen. So you can see that the activity of this white king has supported the advance and eventual promotion of the one remaining white pawn. So the king is a piece that definitely evolves in its role throughout the game. In the beginning, we want to keep it safe. We want to keep it behind its castle where it's protected, especially from the opposing queen. After the queens are traded, we can consider bringing the king out, and especially as more and more pieces are traded. The more pieces that are traded, the safer the king is, because the less potential threats and attacks are going to be present.